The NASDAQ down pretty markedly. Let us get to China. It is locked and loaded as President Trump could very well drop the hammer at any point on another round of U.S. tariffs, the biggest ever. He is reportedly considering a tariff of as much as 25% on $200 billion of Chinese imports. That, folks, is roughly 40% of all of what China exports to every country. And it's anybody's guess when it all could come down. But China says it's ready. It is going to threaten to slap its own tariffs, not on $200 billion, though, but on $60 billion of U.S. goods, targeting specifically manufacturing components, chemicals, and U.S.-made medical devices. But they also mentioned liquefied natural gas. Let us bring in Ambassador Terry Miller. He's the head of international trade at the Heritage Foundation, but also served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Global Economic Issues, joining us in a Fox Business exclusive. Ambassador, let me just start with this. The comment period passed yesterday. The deadline was yesterday for anyone and everyone to complain or support the president's concept of slapping $200 billion worth of tariffs on Chinese goods. What do you think happens? Because we were sort of expecting he might come out swinging today with that.
Well, let's think about those comments, because they were overwhelmingly negative towards the idea of putting new tariffs in place. There are an awful lot of American consumers and businesses that believe they're going to be hurt severely by these new tariffs if they're put in place. And think about the amount. Just do the math. A 25% tariff on $200 billion in goods. That's equivalent to a $50 billion tax increase on the American people.
Well, I do want to get to what is included in the $200 billion that the president has threatened, and we can roll what we call a cyber scroll on this to show people, but this thing was about the size of a phone book, and in it, everything from bicycle components to tractors to bovine semen. I don't know how they convinced the bull to give that up, but seafood, machinery, buttons, hand saws, rubber, tires, vacuum cleaners. We're not sure whether everybody was against these, because I do have to say that there have been some industries that have been markedly hurt by extremely free trade. But what do you think truly happens here? Do you think that because the Chinese are saying, well, we'll not match you step for step on $200 billion and we'll come in with $60 billion, that maybe they're starting to bend before they break?
Well, the truth is the Chinese can't match us dollar for dollar because they don't buy as much from us as we buy from them. There are limits on how many goods they can put on tariffs, just because the exports from the United States to China are not that high. The other factor to consider, of course, is that China's not really a market economy, so the fact that their government puts tariffs on doesn't necessarily have the same market impact that it would tariffs here in the United States. They can turn right around and subsidize the consumers or industries that would have to pay those tariffs, and the net impact might be almost nothing. The real damage done here is by the U.S. tariffs that have to be paid by U.S. consumers and U.S. businesses.
Would you agree, though, that so much has changed, Ambassador, since China was allowed back in, not even back in, allowed into the World Trade Organization about a decade ago? Initially, they were floundering and they were an opening and growing economy. And now they are the world's second largest economy. Don't they need to man up, and they need to really grow up here and start acting like they are a real economy, stop stealing our intellectual property, and open their markets more than they have?
Yes, I agree with all of that. That would be good for the rest of the world, but most of all, that would be good for China. If they were to open up their economy and liberalize, they could have higher growth rates than they have now. The fact is, their economy is starting to slow down. It's starting to mature, and they're going to have a very tough time maintaining the kind of growth rates they've maintained in the past. They need to liberalize in order to get back on the fast track to development and improve the standard of living for their people.
Ambassador